Welcome to the Porn Reboot podcast, where you get practical tips to gaining control over your porn or sex addiction. We help ambitious men end their out-of-control sexual behavior with pornography, sex, and masturbation so that you can maximize your life, perform at your potential, and remain in control in the driver's seat, which is where you have to be in order to gain or maintain the success you want in life. I'm your host, J.K. Emezi, certified sex and porn addiction recovery coach. Welcome to the episode. I can't help but notice that America lately seems to be acting like a porn addict in a full-blown relapse. Brother, there are moments in a man's life when he realizes that the thing he's been running to for comfort has quietly become the place that he's hiding from himself. In rebooting, we learned that relapse doesn't arrive like a villain kicking down the door. It comes softly. It asks permission. It tells stories that sound reasonable when you're tired. It promises relief, not ruin. And by the time you notice what you've traded away, the damage has already learned your name. And that's how relapse works for a porn addict. And it's how civilizations sometimes lose their way. See, a porn addict in relapse isn't really chasing sex. He's chasing feeling. He's chasing aliveness or power, escape or certainty. Porn just happens to be the fastest road there, even if it's paved with lies. Likewise, America doesn't seem addicted to chaos for its own sake. It looks addicted to stimuli, in my opinion, to outrage that sharpens the senses, to spectacle that drowns out the quiet questions, to narratives that make us feel righteous instead of responsible. In porn addiction, we call this dopamine debt, where you're borrowing intensity from the future because the present feels too thin to hold you. And a nation can do that too. Fantasy can become your anesthesia. You know, at Porn Reboot, we talk about men using pornography to medicate or anesthetize their pain, your loneliness, your trauma, or your stress. A porn addict in relapse lives in fantasy. He edits reality until it flatters him or soothes him. He prefers imagined power to earned strength. He chooses illusion because illusion doesn't demand change. And America, lately, feels split between competing fantasies. See, one says that we are invincible and blameless. Another says that we are doomed and betrayed. Both spare us the hard work of what we call in Porn Reboots a relapse autopsy. See, rebooting, personal or nationally, begins when a fantasy gives way to truth, even when truth doesn't feel heroic. You know, there's a very cruel mathematics, so to speak, to pornography addiction. And that mathematics is that yesterday's high becomes to today's baseline. For the porn addict, what once shocked you now bores you. What once excited you now barely registers. And so you escalate more novelty, more extremity, more intensity, until your nervous system forgets what calm feels like. See, in America, moderation no longer excites anyone. Compromise doesn't trend anymore. Quiet competence can't compete with spectacle. So, rhetoric escalates. Conflict sharpens. Everything must be louder, faster, more absolute. Tolerance builds. Humanity erodes. You know, pornography addiction teaches a man to look at people as means, not as the mysteries that we are, not with curiosity to get to know another human being. So bodies begin to replace stories because, how you can use a woman or a man's body eventually replaces the dignity of that person's body the more you watch pornography. So when a culture objectifies, it does the same thing. It turns your neighbors into avatars. It turns your opponents into caricatures. It turns entire groups into symbols of something. Empathy then becomes inefficient. Complexity becomes inconvenient. But what rebooting does is that it restores your personhood. And so does democracy, when it's healthy, of course. Let's talk about entitlement, and you as a porn addict, and America as a country. See, every relapse has a sentence that unlocks the door. Like mine was like, I deserve this. Okay, when I got busier in life in my early 20s. So I'd say, I deserve this. That was my justification. The porn addict tells himself that life has been hard, so the indulgence is now earned. So he begins to mistake relief for reward. A nation can fall for the same lie. We justify dysfunction because we're tired. We excuse excess because we're stressed. We're just normalizing behavior that would have absolutely alarmed us in the past. And when you get entitled, it's like a sedative. It dulls your conscience before it dulls your pain. I originally named this podcast episode America in Incognito Mode. Porn addicts love incognito mode because it feels like freedom without consequences. No history, no witness, no memory. But what recovery does is that it teaches a very hard truth. What isn't seen still shapes you. And America's fragmentation, like all the echo chambers, all the algorithmic silos, all the parallel realities, all of that resembles, from my point of view, a collective incognito mode. No shared story, no common witness, no accountability that lasts longer than a news cycle. So isolation begins to feed your relapse, and connection interrupts it. In porn reboots, rebooting isn't about willpower. It isn't about white-knuckled abstinence. It's about rebuilding a life worth staying present for. And when we apply it to the United States, rebooting would look like things like less stimulation and more meaning, less fantasy and more truth, less outrage about what's happening politically and more regulation, less objectification and more relationship, less impulsivity, more structure. And I will say that the hardest part of rebooting, it isn't quitting porn. It's learning to live without that anesthesia, learning to live without that medication. And that needs to be done for a man to become a man. That needs to be done for a certain type of culture to evolve. Staying porn-free is quieter than relapsing. The truth is that it's less dramatic. It's less flattering. But it's where real strength grows. It's where integrity returns. It's where you stop running and you start belonging to yourself, to others, to reality. And like all true reboot journeys, it begins not with condemnation, but with an honest sentence, spoken without flinching. You must tell yourself this. And that sentence is, this isn't working anymore. I'm JK, your brother in this struggle. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Porn Reboot podcast. I'll speak to you later on in the week. If you found this episode helpful, here are 4 ways I can help you with your out-of-control sexual behavior for free. The first way is to grab a free copy of my book, Confessions of a Porn Addict, 7 Secrets of Porn-Free Men at elevatedrecovery.org, or visit the link in the description below this episode. The second way is, if you're not sure where to start, but you'd like to learn more about my team and I, if you'd like to spend time with like-minded professionals and business owners who are controlling their behavior, then join our free and confidential group, the Porn Reboot group on Facebook. There's a link to join in the description below this episode. The third way is if you need help right now because you have a burning issue, your behavior with pornography is hurting you mentally or emotionally, you're about to lose your relationship, you want to live up to your potential, be an authentic man, and free yourself from shame, guilt, and underachieving, then click on the link in the description below this episode that says free coaching call. And the fourth way is to leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy this podcast, so that we can reach more men who are struggling in silence and bring back the lessons we learn from coaching them to freedom.